Chapter 13 of This Country of Ours. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This Country of Ours by H. E. Marshall. Chapter 13. The Adventures of Captain John Smith. Raleigh was the true father of England beyond the seas. He was a great statesman and patriot. But he was a dreamer too, and all his schemes failed. Other men followed him who likewise failed, but it would take too long to tell of them all. Of Bartholomew Gosnold, who discovered and named Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod. Of Bartholomew Gilbert, brave Sir Humphrey's son, who was slain by Indians, and of many more besides. Again and again men tried to plant a colony on the shores of America. Again and again they failed. But with British doggedness they went on trying, and at length succeeded. Raleigh lay in the Tower of London, a prisoner accused of treason. All his lands were taken from him. Virginia, which had been granted to him by Queen Elizabeth, was the King's once more to give to whom he would. So now two companies formed, one of London merchants called the London Company, one of Plymouth merchants called the Plymouth Company. And both these companies prayed King James to grant them permission to found colonies in Virginia. Virginia, therefore, was divided into two parts, the right to found colonies in the southern half being given to the London Company, the right to found colonies in the northern half being given to the Plymouth Company, upon condition that the colonies founded must be 100 miles distant from each other. These companies were formed by merchants. They were formed for trade and in the hope of making money, in spite of the fact that up to this time no man had made money by trying to found colonies in America, but on the contrary many had lost fortunes. Of the two companies now formed it was only the London Company which really did anything. The Plymouth Company indeed sent out an expedition which reached Virginia, but the colony was a failure, and after a year of hardships the colonists set sail for England, taking home with them such doleful accounts of their sufferings that none who heard them ever wished to help to found a colony. The expedition of the London Company had a better fate. It was in December, 1606, that the little fleet of 3 ships, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, put out from England and turned westward towards the New World. With the expedition sailed Captain John Smith. He was bronzed and bearded like a Turk, a swaggering, long-headed, lovable sort of man, ambitious too, and not given to submit his will to others. Since a boy of 16 he had led a wandering, adventurous life, a life cram full of heroic deeds, of hairbreadth escapes of which we have no space to tell here. But I hope some day you will read his own story of these days, for he was a writer as well as a warrior, and "what his sword did, his pen wrote." Every American boy and girl should read his story, for he has been called the first American writer. Now with this saucy, swaggering fellow on board, troubles were not far to seek. The voyage was long and tedious. For 6 weeks adverse winds kept the little fleet prisoner in the English Channel, within sight of English shores, a thing trying to the tempers of men used to action, and burning with impatience to reach the land beyond the seas. They lay idle with nothing to do but talk, so they fell to discussing matters about the colony they were to found. And from discussing they fell to disputing, until it ended at length in a bitter quarrel between Smith and another of the adventurers, Captain Edward Wingfield. Captain Wingfield was twice John Smith's age, and deemed that he knew much better how a colony ought to be formed than this dictatorial youth of 27. He himself was just as dictatorial and narrow into the bargain, so between the two the voyage was by no means peaceful. Good Master Hunt, the preacher who went with the expedition, in spite of the fact that he was so weak and ill that few thought he would live, did his best to still the angry passions. To some extent he succeeded, and when a fair wind blew at length, the ships spread their sails to it, and were soon out of sight of England. 2 months of storm and danger passed before the adventurers sighted the West Indies. Here they went ashore on the island of San Dominica. Delighted once more to see land and escape from the confinement of the ship, they stayed 3 weeks among the sunny islands. They hunted and fished, traded with the savages, boiled pork in hot natural springs, feasted on fresh food and vegetables, and generally enjoyed themselves. But among all this merrymaking Wingfield did not forget his anger against John Smith. Their quarrels became so bad that Wingfield decided to end both quarrels and John Smith, so he ordered a gallows to be set up, and, having accused Smith of mutiny, made ready to hang him. But John Smith stoutly defended himself. Nothing could be proved against him. He laughed at the gallows, and, as he quaintly puts it, could not be persuaded to use them. Nevertheless, although nothing could be proved against him, there were many who quite agreed that Captain John Smith was a turbulent fellow. So to keep him quiet they clapped him in irons, and kept him so until their arrival in Virginia. After leaving the West Indies the adventurers fell into more bad weather and lost their course, but finally they arrived safely in Chesapeake Bay. They named the capes on either side Henry and Charles, in honor of the 2 sons of their king. Upon Cape Henry they set up a brass cross, upon which was carved Jacobus Rex, and thus claimed the land for England. Then they sailed on up the river, which they named James River, in honor of the king himself. Their settlement they named Jamestown, also in his honor. Jamestown has now disappeared, but the 2 capes and the river are still called by the names given them by these early settlers. Before this expedition sailed, the directors of the company had arranged who among the colonists were to be the rulers. But for some quaint reason they were not told. Their names, together with many instructions as to what they were to do, were put into a sealed box, and orders were given that this box was not to be opened until Virginia was reached. The box was now opened, and it was found that John Smith was named among the 7 who were to form the council. The others were much disgusted at this, and in spite of all he could say, they refused to have him in the council. They did, however, set him free from his fetters. Of the council Wingfield was chosen president. All the others, except John Smith, took oath to do their best for the colony. Then at once the business of building houses was begun. While the council drew plans, the men dug trenches and felled trees in order to clear space on which to pitch their tents, or otherwise busied themselves about the settlement. The Indians appeared to be friendly, and often came to look on curiously at these strange doings. And Wingfield thought them so gentle and kindly that he would not allow the men to build any fortifications, except a sort of screen of interwoven boughs. Besides building houses, one of the colonists' first cares was to provide themselves with a church. But indeed it was one of the quaintest churches ever known. An old sail was stretched beneath a group of trees to give shelter from the burning sun, and to make a pulpit a plank of wood was nailed between 2 trees which grew near together. And here good Master Hunt preached twice every Sunday, while the men sat on felled trunks, reverently listening to his long sermons. While the houses were being built, Smith, with some 20 others, was sent to explore the country. They sailed up the river and found the Indians to all appearance friendly, but they found no gold or precious stones, and could hear nothing of a passage to the Pacific Ocean, which they had been told to seek. So they returned to Jamestown. Arriving here they found that the day before the Indians had attacked the settlement, and that 1 Englishman lay slain and 17 injured. This was a bitter disappointment to Wingfield, who had trusted in the friendliness of the Indians. But at length he was persuaded to allow fortifications to be built. Even then, however, the colonists were not secure, for as they went about their business felling trees or digging the ground, the savages would shoot at them from the shelter of the surrounding forest. If a man strayed from the fort he was sure to return wounded, if he returned at all, and in this sort of warfare the stolid English were no match for the wily Indians. "Our men," says Smith, "by their disorderly straggling were often hurt, when the savages by the nimbleness of their heels well escaped." So 6 months passed, and the ships which had brought out the colonists were ready to go back to England with a cargo of wood instead of the gold